This is our review of the treaty and the League. Our objectives today, we're going to talk about Wilson's 14 points, and we'll analyze the Treaty of Versailles, the treaty that technically ends World War I between the Allies, save the United States and save Russia because they're already out of it, and Germany. There are other treaties that are involved, but the Treaty of Versailles is the most historically important. And so, if you remember from U.S. involvement in World War I, it turns the tide towards the Allied powers because they increase the numbers, they increase supplies. Their strategy is very effective. Rather than digging trenches, General Pershing says he's going to continue to go on, and they increase spirit. All the older soldiers on both the Allied and Central sides have been mired in this battle for about 2 years at this point. The Americans are fresh and ready to go. So, the costs of war. Excuse me. You had 8.5 million were dead. In 1919, there'll be a flu pandemic that kills 20 million people, more than double what World War I killed. An amazingly destructive, awful time for humanity. There were financial burdens, basically the costs of war, and the cost of the damages had to be paid by somebody. We'll get to that in a minute. And there was political turmoil. You have the Kaiser leaving in in Germany. The Kaiser leaves in Germany. Very important, not Russia. In Russia, the Tsar had been overthrown, the provisional government had been overthrown, and the Bolsheviks had risen to power. And in Austria-Hungary, that empire essentially dissolves, and you'll see the effects of that on the map in a minute. You get the Paris Peace Conference, the Big Four. David Lloyd George from Great Britain, George Clemenceau from France, Vittorio Orlando from Italy, and Woodrow Wilson from the United States. The Europeans had one objective that they shared, although to varying degrees, and that was punishing Germany. Lloyd George of Britain, he wanted to make sure that Germany was stabilized so that it could be a strong trading partner for the British, but he still wanted to punish them. The French were very, very on the, hey, we have to punish Germany. We have to prevent Germany from invading us again. Italy cared most about gaining colonies that had been promised under the table by Great Britain and France before Italy joined the Allied powers. And the United States wanted Woodrow Wilson's agenda, which is the 14 points which we're going to get into. The 14 points. It was a plan for a lasting peace. Wilson issues it in January of 1818. Remember, the armistice doesn't come till November. And one of the things going through Germany's, the collective thought in Germany is essentially that the 14 points don't seem very punitive. So it might be a good deal, and it might be a good way out of this war. He calls for open treaties, no more treaties like Italy had upon its entry into the war, freedom of the seas, that had been a big issue for the Americans, arms reduction, removing international trade barriers, fair colonial policies. That's the oxymoron. If you have a colonial policy, inherently it can't be fair, but that's what he called for. He wanted to adjust European boundaries along national lines, which happens in some cases it didn't. And he wanted a League of Nations, an international council to solve conflict and prevent wars. The European powers, they didn't really think the League of Nations would be very effective, but they weren't really opposed to it. As good negotiators, they said, Wilson, if you want your League of Nations, then we need to get this, this, and this. And we'll talk about what happens, what that is. So, the territorial changes, the resources went to victors. What we mean by that is regions like Alsace-Lorraine, it had been part of Germany. It was very mineral rich. The map was redrawn to make it part of France. There were colonial losses by Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire. Some colonies received self-determination. Others became mandates of the winners. For instance, Palestine, the present-day Israel and West Bank and Gaza. That became what was called Mandate Palestine under British control. Disarmament, there was reductions in military forces. However, the most reduced was Germany. Germany was reduced to 100,000 soldiers. 100,000 soldiers was not as many as Germany had in some battles of World War I. They were forced to accept the war guilt clause, basically assigning all the blame for the war to Germany. Germany had to pay reparations. This was money. This was material. They basically had to pay for all the costs and all the damages. And the League of Nations, Wilson's dream, was achieved and part of the Treaty of Versailles. And so if you look at the map, the way it was redrawn, got this off the internet yesterday, two big things. Austria. It goes from being Austria-Hungary with Bosnia, part of Bosnia in there, to being this very, very small country. If I put my mouse, look at the new Austria compared to the old Austria, and you have new nations being formed, Yugoslavia, and then look at little Austria. There's Czechoslovakia, a new nation. And the border between Germany and Russia. So this is the old border, and the new border doesn't really exist. Now you have Poland between Russia and Germany. You also have East Prussia, which was separated from Germany, but still part of it. So Germany now wasn't contiguous. So the treaty, it contradicts the 14 points. The 14 points call for ending secret negotiations. The Treaty of Versailles, completely a secret negotiation, and most countries were left out of it. Self-determination, not exactly. The boundaries were drawn to benefit the Allies. Arms reductions, well, the Allies decide to use the reparations to rebuild their armies, and collective security was a goal of the 14 points. However, the United States doesn't join the League of Nations because the United States Senate needs 2/3 to ratify Wilson's Treaty of Versailles, and they never got it. The United States was very leery of getting involved in European conflict, of being forced to get involved, and so they did not ratify. And now this new collective security organization doesn't have one of the most important players on the world stage, the United States, and so it's not a very effective, the League of Nations is not very effective at securing peace. Differing views on the treaty. If you want to argue for, you would say it was fair, but it wasn't enforced properly. What if the Americans had joined the League of Nations? It might have been better. It did involve some self-determination, especially on the Balkans. There were some colonies that received independence. There was some disarmament, and a League of Nations was formed. And the League of Nations is a precedent for our modern-day United Nations. Arguments against that was too harsh towards Germany. Plants the seeds for World War II in a lot of ways, not just Germany. Italy feels snubbed. It doesn't get what it wants. Japan feels snubbed. Even Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh went to the Paris Peace Conference and was not taken seriously at all. So it plants seeds for World War II and other conflicts. It wounds the pride of Germany and Italy. That'll come back in World War II. It separated some people based on the boundaries, and the Nazi Party will use it to draw support in Germany. So what you want to consider for the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I and America is Wilson. Was he a successful war president or not? And you can use this lesson, the reading, to build an argument, positive or negative, on that. So that is the treaty and the beginning of the League of Nations.